And we are back. Welcome back to the class, everyone. We currently have a lot of characters coming to the game from the Ahsoka series. And while that does include some super cool characters from the Imperial Remnant faction, I want to take a minute, or rather some time, in today's video to hash out the Empire faction as it has seemed to settled, and that is going to involve ranking the characters from strongest to weakness, what order most people should farm them in, and then more importantly, how do we split up those darn Imperial troopers? So as we said in the intro, we are going to be going over the overall ranking of these characters first, and very unrelated to this video topic in general, you will notice that I'm actually quite a bit lower on the screen today. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. I have seen a few requests over our videos for the last couple of months suggesting this, given the fact that my face now blocks a lot of the factions, and given that this is a video about factions, I figured this would be a great time to test it out. So let me know in the comments, is it weird? Do you not like it? Do you prefer it? Continue. So getting back into the actual video here, talking about Empire characters, when we look at who are the overall strongest, not only in their own teams, but in a variety of teams or in a variety of places, with or without Datacrons, it really comes down to Lord Vader and Third Sister. Galactic Legends typically just get a free pass into this section as a whole, just because they are not just strong because their kits are good, but they are what I would say artificially strong in the fact that they really just got stat dumped on. If it weren't for even all the cool things they did, but the fact that they are getting all damage reduced by 30% and then a ton of health and protection based off their relic levels, and then even further addition to that, they're also just giving atrocious base speeds that don't even necessarily rely on what the kit is doing. They all start somewhere around like in the high 300s, giving them an edge against pretty much all the other characters, including the ones that we're going to be seeing here. Next up is going to be Third Sister, aka Reva, who really revolutionized the Inquisitors. Prior to her coming to the game, they always had pretty good control and survivability, but they massively lacked damage. Reva came in and just completely solved that problem against a variety of teams in game. Not only does her leadership allow for locked death mark on characters who cleanse themselves, which is typically helpful, not always, but typically helpful. In addition to that, what I believe is more important is the fact that she has an ability that is not tied to Grand Arena. In fact, it's not really tied to any game mode. The fact that she can get locked healing immunity on all enemies is a huge game changer, because before, when the Inquisitors were really just controlling and taking hits, now they can really whittle the enemy down because they can't heal or, raise their defense back up because they have defense down over those two turns. So overall, very, very good characters. Reva herself can go in and out of a few different teams depending on Empire, Inquisitores, as well as even unaligned Force user for the odd roster out there. I do actually have a friend that does that, so we'll throw that out. Shout out to Sympathetic Dodo. Up next, we have our Tier 2, and these characters, sure, they're not Galactic Legends, but they're still really, really good. They can, again, be used in a few different homes, or they are just really powerful, and quite frankly, I think all of them are kind of a mix of the two. First up is going to be Grand Inquisitor, and I really do recommend people getting this character, even if you are one of those people out there who essentially got Reva for free because your guild worked really hard and got them, but you weren't necessarily working on them, you were on another project. And the reason why is, I've actually seen Reva teams that exist out there without the Grand Inquisitor, and to be frank, they're not nearly as good. What he is actually adding to the Reva team is quite substantial with the debuff torture, and then just giving this ridiculous amount of buffs to the entire team. The overall cleanse is really nice too, and then, just having one of the embedded Inquisitors that can do a lot of damage because he will essentially assist himself 2 times over, either guaranteeing a crit or guaranteeing true damage, is very, very nice. Not to mention, the Scythe is actually really important for a few of the Empire counters out though. So overall, fairly versatile. He can be used under Lord Vader, he can be used in his own team, he can be used under Reva. His TW Omicrons are also pretty good, depending on the ones you want to put on. Not sure if I would really recommend his leader for most people, just because Reva actually does still end up being the leader in TW in most situations. Next up is going to be Emperor Palpatine, kind of the bread and butter of the Empire teams. Don't really need to talk about him too much. Everybody knows him because everybody has him, because he's been made super accessible. And even being accessible and a fairly simpler kit, at least nowadays, he still pulls a lot of weight. Yes, he does need some bigger help from characters like Mara Jade or Darth Vader or even Starkiller, but at the same time, he's been consistently good in the beginning, mid, and end game, depending on what you have to give him. Next up is going to be Dark Trooper Moff Gideon, a newer character that has managed to shine despite the fact that we have really a ton of teams and not that many places to use them. Granted, in 3v3 it does help out a lot because he has a very good leadership and he doesn't necessarily have to deal with having to split teams with Veers and Iden in that regard. Obviously very strong in territory wars with his territory Omicrons, and one of the reasons I'm a pretty big fan of him in general is CG finally feels like they gave us the TW character without necessarily locking the character's personality behind this. All of the turn meter shenanigans, which is really kind of how DTMG works, or rather using your enemy's turn meter shenanigans against them. It really, when you put the Omicron on, yes, it is very good because it has a lot of mastery and speed, and that's just generally helpful. The team can still have some consistency outside of TW, I guess is what I'm getting at. Next up is going to be our great friend Moff Gideon, and when we think about versatile characters, Moff Gideon is probably still in the top 10 plug and play overall for the entire game. Not only is he good in Empire, Imperial Remnant, and Imperial Trooper teams, which he is, he's also actually good under Padme in some really weird situations where he can generate a lot of protection up, and you can just leading the enemy team using support Galactic Republic characters. Just so many universal tools between the Armor Shred, which again, very nice. You can kind of throw that on any team. And then control the situation as well. Just lowering your enemy's turn meter and then buffing your own turn meter just a little bit to kind of reset things, along with a mass assist and all the buffs it gives. Very, very nice. Leadership, really not all that great. I tried it in 3v3 once. Actually, I tried it 3 times. It backfired every single time. Next up, Piet, again, kind of on the more versatile side of characters, but also generally very good. Also, the fleet commander for our executor fleet. But even on top of that, he's good in pretty much all Empire teams. He's great under Lord Vader. He's great under Imperial Troopers because of how the buffs synergize with Veer's leadership. And then on top of that, he actually has some like strict called out synergy with Darth Vader as well. So really, regardless of where you are in the game, you're going to have a place to use them, whether it be Lord Vader, Emperor Palpatine, Darth Vader, or even Imperial Troopers like we talked about before. Moving on to our tier 3, this is where the characters are still very much good, they just become slightly more niche in use. Darth Vader really having most of his usability in the beginning and mid-game, still maintaining a little bit in the end, but he becomes more of a filler character than he becomes the shining star of each team, just because of the amount of tags and the amount of things he's able to do with Merciless Massacre. Mara Jade, again, very important for the Emperor Palpatine team, whether you're using Empire or with Star Killer, but overall doesn't have a whole lot of viability outside of that. Still amazing character. Iden Versio doing a ton of things on her own team in GAC, and even being a nice cleanse for a Veer's team, but really most of her value comes out, and I think Defender, who is, again, one of the reasons why the Empire fleet can do a lot of the things that it can do nowadays is because that Marquis, or I guess Galactic Chase ship, was just so overtuned. But I mean, it's very fun to use, and it's a very relevant when you're going to farm a roster. Thrawn, obviously still kind of in the plug and play area, not quite as much as Moff Gideon is nowadays, but Fracture is still a really good tool, especially because a lot of the stronger teams that we have coming out now are Galactic Legend level-esque, but at the same time, they're not actually Galactic Legends, meaning they can actually be fractured. So take that, Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi. Hopefully you won't delete my characters instantly now, but you probably still will once you come out of it. And next up is going to be Veers, a character that really, again, similar to Mara Jade, is only good on, or really only amazing on one team, but in that one team is just mind-blowingly good. Overall, fantastic character. Moving on next to what I guess I'm just calling the Ink tier, and the reason why we kind of grouped all these characters in here is because they're really awkward. If you have a Grand Inquisitor or Reva, they're amazing. Top tier, up there with Galactic Legends, amazing. If you don't have either of those characters, they are terrible. I mean, there's a little bit of plug and play use, especially with Ninth Sister in the Lord Vader team. But overall, other than, I guess, Second Sister ship, they're really just not doing all that much. They're actually higher than the Poodoo tier, so I guess I should say that overall. They're not complete garbage, but they really sit in that limbo between being really good and, like, why did you bother if you weren't going to get Grand Inquisitor and Reva, right? At a minimum, Grand Inquisitor. I still actually kind of like that team, even with Grand Inquisitor from a PvE perspective. There's a lot of resources to be had there. Next up is T4, where we get a little, again, more niche as things go in. Scout Trooper, not necessarily required for DTMG or Iden, but he really is one of the things that takes the team to the next level, so overall, very good. Royal Guard, pretty much there for Lord Vader. You don't have to have him, but it's really weird not to, especially because he's required for C. Dark Trooper, very similar position to that of Scout Trooper. While you don't necessarily need him for every Imperial Trooper team, he is the exact character that is going to take Veers and Piet to the next level, just because he does so much damage once Piet stacks of Imperial Trap get going. Imperial Super Commando and Gar, very specific, more niche, again, kind of in the Maul area. They take Maul to the next level. The only issue with that is you really need to have Maul separate from Lord Vader to be able to do that in the first place. So again, we're going into a more and more niche category here. Now, tier 5, these characters are still not in their bad sector. You obviously need them if you're going to want to fill out the various Imperial Trooper teams that are out there. But again, they're not shining quite as much as, say, Moff Gideon or Scout Trooper, DTMG, Iden, Veers, that are really the whole reason the team exists. You still need them to complement, but they're a less of a priority if you're farming them. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to farm up Stormtrooper using an item team if you don't even have Iden, for example. But overall, they're important because you really do want to fill out the teams. Stark a little bit less so, but he's also required for a Galactic Legend, so he kind of gets lumped in there as well. Now, the final tier, these guys, you heard me saying the other characters didn't suck. Yeah, these kind of do. I mean, Tarkin actually is redeemed just slightly through his ship. It's kind of fallen off. There was a period where it was really more important when we were using a very specific profundity counter. But overall, a lot of people have shifted to other things, and a lot of people just aren't leaving profundity on defense anymore. So he's really not doing much. I mean, he's kind of nice in the beginning of the game to generate debuffs, but that's very kind of short-sighted, and ultimately you don't end up taking him because he's a requirement, which is about the same that can be said about Director Krennic and TIE Fighter Pilot. Snowtrooper and Magma Trooper are really only exist as like really bare minimum filler characters that I'm not even sure if I would recommend to most people. I mean, I don't have that many characters still left at Gear 12, and I left them at Gear 12 because as things currently stand, and this is a little bit pending with the Imperial Remnant movement, you can't really even utilize 3 Imperial Trooper teams, assuming one of them is led by DTMG, who I realize is not an Imperial Trooper. So if you're going to have to cut out any characters, I kind of just chose to cut them out. And then last but not least is going to be our good friend IPD, and he's going to kind of get left out of the ranking entirely just because he really plays with Aphra. And while that's great and all, it'd be a little bit weird to rank him amongst Empire characters when he doesn't really fit into any of the teams. Typically, he can, but not always. So now that we've really covered the overall ranking, I want to go through a tentative farming plan. And I've talked about this before in these types of videos. This is not meant as a go out there and make an Empire-only account. I mean, you could do that, and it would probably be fun, and there's a lot of experimentation that could be done there. But for the vast majority of people, you're going to mix it up with the Jedi, or Galactic Republic, or Sith, or some other faction that you genuinely love, like Gungans. But for the most part, a general natural flow of how the factions should look, so that you can kind of match yourself and check yourself to make sure you're kind of in the right direction. This can be a good tool in that regard. Wave 1 are what I essentially call the free characters. You're going to get these guys by almost doing nothing at all. Emperor Palpatine can be unlocked once you have 5 rebels, which the way the game is currently shaping in the very beginning, you pretty much get those for free. You might not get them immediately all the way to 7 stars, but pretty close enough to start using him and get some use out of him. Vader, very similar concept. You just get so many shards as the game progresses. You should finish farming him, but at the same time, once you naturally go through the achievements, unlocking him, you get him, have fun with him. Thrawn, same exact thing that we're talking about with Emperor Palpatine, just specific to Phoenix, which again are really highlighted in the beginning of the game now. General Tarkin, our Grand Moff Tarkin, you do get him for free because of how the fleets are organized. Same thing with TIE Fighter Pilots. So the reason why you should be farming these 5 characters first is because you just get them for free. So it seems a little bit awkward to put them somewhere else if you're already going to start out with them. Now, when we're looking at filling out the rest of the roster, I want to go for really high value characters that are, quite frankly, just really easy to farm. When we look at Veers being on a 12 hard node, that does facilitate things quite a bit, and his team can also be gathered quite easily. There are obviously better Empire teams like Inquisitors or Lord Vader or even the Emperor Palpatine Starkiller team, but the threshold to be able to get those characters is a lot harder because it requires relics to be able to unlock a variety of them. General Veers doesn't have such weaknesses. Go to the hard node that's fairly cheap, fairly early in, start farming him, unlock him early, and start having fun. The same thing can pretty much be said on Moff Gideon, who's actually farmable in 2 different locations, which at one is going to be best for you is going to vary a little bit on what you're doing with your overall roster. Piet, kind of the same thing. Still very hard node heavy, but at the same time, it's a team that is going to have a lot of dividends with their assault battle, and quite frankly, they're just good to have in general. Mara Jade, as we talked about previously, is going to be taking your Emperor Palpatine team up to that next level. And even, I will say this, even if you can't do a 16 hard node and get her all the way to 7 stars, man, just unlock her. Unlock her, get her to like Gear 9 or wherever you can before you start having to use Kyrotech, and she will already take the Emperor Palpatine to the next level. Even if you're having to use Vader as a catalyst to be able to go first, because he's just naturally a lot faster and it's easier to get him to gear 13, having Mara Jade on the team to like loop staggers once you get going, it's pretty detrimental to enemy teams. So overall, very good character to go after towards the beginning, especially because you're essentially getting Emperor Palpatine for free. Dark Trooper, I believe, is also worked in there so that you get him maybe not at 7 stars, but you do get him fairly easily with how the newer game is set up. So we're going to throw him in there just because you're going to have him anyways. Wave 3 is going to involve Iden. This starts to become a very good team, especially in Galactic War. That's something you're trying to work through in the very beginning of the game. Just very stat heavy, a lot of counters. Overall, great team, and this can be a fun opportunity to, again, work on these slightly easier hard-no characters like Stormtrooper, like Death Trooper, and then I put Snow Trooper and Range Trooper in here, and Range Trooper's goated, so kind of ignore the following comment, but you don't have to get all these characters up to relics. In fact, you probably shouldn't. This whole area here should probably stay at somewhere around the Gear 11, Gear 12 range for a really long time, because, quite frankly, that's all they need to be until you get to higher levels, and really, I didn't even take Iden Versio up to relic levels until we really got into Defender, just because the team is capable and relics could probably be better spent elsewhere. And actually, at Iden Versio, you could even leave lower if you don't want to have to invest Kyrotech in her. But yeah, take that with a grain of salt as far as how high the character should go up, just because you don't necessarily need them there. Then, at a certain point, once we have kind of the basics of the Empire done between Emperor Palpatine, Veers, Iden, Inquisitors are kind of, in my opinion, a natural flow. They're still one of the best teams in the game. And furthermore, they're having kind of what the Geonosians used to have in regards to overall guild effect. And but what I mean by that is you're going to be able to get into a better guild by having Inquisitorius early. And again, I'm not saying they should be your first faction or your second or your third, and quite frankly, I'm not even saying they should be your third Empire faction team to go after, but they are a target somewhere in the mid-range to go after, to be able to move up in the world, to be able to get Grand Inquisitor, to be able to get that assault battle going, to be able to get those better Empire ships, to be able to get into a better guild. They are pretty crucial. So, and that pretty much only leaves Lord Vader after Inquisitorius are done, which does feel like a natural flow. He is a pretty expensive character, but at the same time, he is very good. We're just going to leave him for last because you're better off investing your relics into Inquisitorius first, getting more rewards out of it, and then getting Lord Vader and getting that great, juicy PvP team that he is causing a ton of havoc. Now, we'll include Royal Guard and Scout and ISC and GAR in there as well, because those are kind of the finishing touches for the other characters, or the other teams out there, I should say, that you'll need to kind of finish things up. Now, I do have this little section here where it says varies, and it's just because you really don't farm or build up these next 5 characters in the various category based off of your other Empire characters. You get them for a variety of reasons. Stark and Krennic you typically purely get because they're requirements for a Galactic Legend you would go after, otherwise you really would never farm them. Imperial Prodride again for Afra. Shore Trooper really serves, while he can be used in Empire teams, he's really just an overall, like, great pre-taunting tank. I have used him most recently with Jedi Knight Luke, so that's an option for when you build him up, but you don't necessarily have to build him up for Empire. And then Dark Trooper Moff Gideon, we put him in here just because the way with him being a Conquest character, a lot of people don't really have control on how soon or later, rather, that they can actually farm him. It's different from some of the characters that have been out for a while, like Commander Sokotano, where we can specifically plan around her proving grounds or set aside the currencies that she can be bought with. So whenever you can get him, but it's really hard to put him into a priority from a farming perspective when he's not really that farmable. And then Magma Trooper, maybe just don't. I mean, I've seen some really fun uses for Magma Trooper, but overall, he just kind of meh. I mean, he can do some fun stuff, but it's not overall that impressive. Now, finally, we are going to go to the team splits. This is going to be really easy, and then it is going to become really difficult. We have some very obvious choices when it comes down to splitting the Empire. Exhibit A, being Inquisitors. You should use all the Inquisitors together. Who would have guessed? Not Calvin. Next up, we have Lord Vader. The choices here become fairly obvious as well. Maybe not to everyone, depending on where your roster is at, but Royal Guard was custom reworked specifically to go with Lord Vader with how all his max health works, so pretty much a shoe in there. Thrawn causes a ton of issues for a variety of counters because whoever he fractures really might ruin the enemy counter. I love Ninth Sister in this comp. I realize not everyone's going to have her, so you might be able to substitute this with something like Darth Vader just because he can kind of wreak havoc with ability blocking the entire enemy team. But the reason why I like Ninth Sister so much, if you have her available, is because when we go into our good friend Lord Vader's ultimate, he's actually getting more ultimate charge for when Darkside unaligned for his users take damage. More than that of Empire, and since she's both, she goes with the latter, or rather the former of unaligned force user and actually ends up generating more ultimate charge for Lord Vader. Not only that, because of that, but also she's a tank, so she's going to be getting hit more often. And then overall, just kind of taunts pretty consistently with the rest of, or really the way that her taunt works from her unique ability. You will notice that we have left the 5th slot open, and that is very specifically for Maul, because he is in the best Lord Vader team, despite the fact that he is not Empire. The same pretty much concept for Emperor Palpatine and Mara Jade. You're going to want to fill this team out with Starkiller. Once you do eventually get there, that would be the ideal team, and then obviously a Jedi and Lasufu. But for the most part, you can't really put an Empire character there. In fact, we kind of have to make videos about people who do. But anyways, now that's the easy part. Super cool. Moving on to how do we split up the Imperial Remnant as well as the Imperial Trooper factions. And I guess we can talk a little about the characters who get outsourced, which we've already kind of go over why they're outsourced, either for Dr. Aphra, Plug and Play, Dr. Aphra, Maul, and then the junk characters down there at the bottom for overall splitting. They often just don't make their way into a team. But moving back up to the DTMG versus Imperial Trooper debate, if you'll call it that, there's pretty much 3 different ways to do this. And I will say before we even start on any of these, the reason why you're not seeing Night Trooper or Perry here for that matter is because I don't think they're going to go with Empire at all. In fact, CG has kind of communicated that through several different means. Recently with Perry's kid, that is Death Trooper Pretty. I guess I should explain who that is before I start talking about nicknames. Specifically as callouts to Captain Enoch in their kits. They don't even have the Empire tag to begin with, and I wouldn't be that shocked if much later down the line they upgrade from Enoch all the way up to a Grand Admiral Super Thrawn Galactic Legend. I don't really know where I was going with that. Another Thrawn that would be leading them in the future that would again have the Imperial Remnant tag, maybe without having the Empire tag. All that to say, they're probably not going to be best used here. You might be able to use them as filler with our good friend Dark Trooper Moff Gideon, but that's probably not going to be their end ideal home at the end of the day. So basically how this is going to work is if you're stuck on using DTMG and Veers, these are the 2 best ways to split it. You take Veers and you still get to have Dark Trooper, you still get to have P8, you still get to have range, an enormous amount of synergy between those 4 characters. Stark is kind of nice because I think he gives defense penetration universally overall to the entire, or armor penetration rather, to the entire team, which is pretty nice. And then he has buffs too, so Veers generally doesn't hate that. DTMG, this is pretty much just the entire Imperial Remnant faction, except for Dark Trooper, because Dark Trooper Moff Gideon's leadership, or one of his abilities, doesn't play with droids overall that well, and really Dark Trooper's best used with this Veers team. Now, if you don't want to do that, you actually want to utilize an item team, then this is how we're going to do the splits. You're going to keep the same DTMG team, and then try to produce this item team down below, which can actually still work to great effect. And then if you're wanting to split between Veers and Iden because you don't have Dark Trooper Moff Gideon, you will use this Veers team and this Iden team. So I guess if you guys want to kind of take screenshots of that, and it looks like I cut off Iden's head down here at the beginning, so maybe this camera in the bottom part of the screen actually isn't the overall best idea. Either way, that's kind of how you would want to split it, depending on which leaderships you're wanting to have, or rather not have, to be able to split it. And for anyone asking why we went through that huge lengthy explanation of why we have to split Empire, or rather Imperial Troopers, that way, it's because we don't have enough to actually make 3 full teams, at least in 5v5. If you count here, 5, 8, 13, even adding DTMG for 14, we end up 1 character short. So even if we want to utilize kind of the lesser Imperial Troopers like Snow Trooper and Magma Trooper, we still end up running short, even when including DTMG, who can't even be mentioned here because he's not actually an Imperial Trooper. So that is going to be today's video. Let me know what you guys think. Again, let me know also how you feel about my face being down in this corner, if that's awkward, worse, better, etc. But thanks for watching, and as always, guys, stay awesome.